Hello pips, welcome to my session at Azure Back to School. I'm really happy that I have this opportunity that I can share information about another fantastic service in Azure. So this service will help you potentially to positively impact to have impact in your environment, not only Azure, but also in on-premise and also maybe other clouds. So my name is Saeid Dahl, and I work as solution architect, senior solution architect, and I've been part of the IT industry for about 15 years. With the last 8 years that I spent on Microsoft solution, particularly Azure. My main areas of expertise within Azure include automation, integration, cloud adoption, and hybrid environment. So feel free to contact me or connect me within LinkedIn or Twitter. I would like to hear your feedback of these sessions. So now let's shift spotlight away from me and dive into my session and agenda about Azure Arc. So today we will talk about what is the Azure Arc, how does Azure Arc work, and different type of Azure Arc management components. And also we will look at pricing model of the Azure Arc. And if you wait until the end, you will be amazed about what you will learn in the demo. So first, what is Azure Arc? When your resources are located in Azure, it's really perfect because you can use Azure features, Azure environment to manage, monitor, and make your Azure resources in a secure environment, and you can manage them in a secure way. And also you can use Azure governance to manage them. So actually Azure makes your life easy. But wait, how about when you have other clouds, resources on other clouds, or even you have on-premise environment? So basically it's pretty hard, or I wouldn't say that it's not possible, but I'm saying that you have spent time and also cost to achieve management, scalability, and security because you don't have a centralized management system that you can control all of these environment. So the solution of this scenario is Azure Arc. So Azure Arc help you to have a clear visibility and have flexibility to scale your environment. And when you have all of these aspects, you can easily start innovating your solutions. Basically, it makes your environment to be enough flexible and scalable that helps you to focus only on your innovation and deploying new solutions in your environment. Azure Arc is the solution that enables you to manage and govern your resources across different environments, such as on-premise, multi-cloud, and also edge. So Azure Arc works by extending the Azure control plane and services to your resources, regardless of where they are hosted. You can use Azure Arc to connect your resources to Azure and get centralized view of them. Also, you have this option to use Azure Portal, Azure CLI, Azure PowerShell, or even Azure REST API to manage your resources, which is really amazing because in many scenarios, you need to have a centralized environment to manage your resources based on some automation, integration, or even you have some customized solution that you can use that kind of method to get or update your environment. Apply consistent policies and configuration to your resources using Azure Policy and Azure Resource Manager templates is the other part and feature that you can use in Azure Arc. Monitor and secure your resources using Azure Monitor, Azure Security Data Center, and Microsoft Defender for Cloud is the security part. And basically, you can use the great Microsoft Defender for Cloud for your on-premise resources or even other cloud resources. Deploy and manage cloud native services on your resources using Azure Arc enabled data service, app services, and machine learning is the other part of this solution. So basically, you can have resources in the other environment, but still you can use features like machine learning, app services, or data service in your environment. So Azure Arc enables you to have this flexibility for your solution, and you can innovate a new solution for your environments without any problem, and it's a kind of hassle-free solution. So, how Azure Arc does work? To use Azure Arc, you need to install the Azure Arc agent on your resources that communicate with the Azure control plane. The agent collects metadata, necessary metadata about your resources and sends it to Azure. The agent also receives commands from Azure and execute them on your resources. The agent uses a secure outbound. It's really important to know that. Uses a secure outbound connection to Azure and does not require any inbound port to be opened. It means you do not need to be worried about incoming connection. You just need outbound connections. And also you have other features if you don't have outbound connections that I will mention about that in next slides. You can install the agent manually or use automated methods such as scripts, configuration management tools, or virtual machine extensions. You can also use Azure Arc Enable Server Extension or Azure Arc Enable Kubernetes extensions for Visual Studio Code to connect your resources to Azure Arc from within your deployment environment, which is really great. So you have no problem to continue your deployment environment and have a solid environment for your deployment. Once you connect your resources to Azure Arc, they appear as Azure resources in your subscription. You can assign them to resource groups or use tags, apply role-based access control, which is really great, and use Azure features like monitoring for or Cloud Defender or policies. So basically, it's like you have Azure resources, but still it's not. It's non-Azure resources. So you have everything in one place and you can easily centralize everything. So let's go through the different Azure management components. The first one, which is still in preview, but it's really amazing, is Azure Arc Resource Bridge, which is a pivotal component. So basically, Azure Arc Resource Bridge Architect view that you can see in this slide, it tells you how you can use Azure Arc. So you can easily manage Windows or Linux running on Azure Stack HCI, or you can manage your VMs, which is in Azure VMware or in System Center VM Manager. So it empowers users to effortless manage VMs from the Azure platform. The architecture composed of Resource Bridge, Arc agents, custom locations, cluster extensions, and specific services ensure the seamless operation of service and solution across private cloud environment, and making VM management more cohesive and unified. So if you already using VMware or if you have Azure Stack HCI, so you can easily use Azure Arc to centralize everything, which is really great. Next part is Azure Arc enabled servers, which is very, very useful, and you can use it in different ways, not only for monitoring, but also for many other ways. When you link to Azure Arc enabled servers, your machine gains the ability to execute operational tasks as tasks to native Azure virtual machines, including governance through Azure Auto-Manage configuration, protection with Microsoft Defender for endpoint, configuration streamlined via Azure Automation, automated update management, and post-deployment task with Arc-enabled server VM extension. On top of that, monitoring capabilities encompass operating system performance tracking, monitoring capabilities, discovery with VM Insight, and the collection of diverse log data through the log analytics agent, all contributing to robust management, security, and efficiency in your connected environment. So when you link your servers to Azure Arc, it's like you have the Azure VM. So you can do a lot of things. You can make sure about the management, you can make sure about the security, and you have several options for automation. So it's like an open door to new features and new options. So Azure Arc enable Kubernetes. So if you love Kubernetes, if you're working with Kubernetes, and if you have other clouds or on-premise environments and you have Kubernetes resources there, it's a really great solution that you can use to manage your Kubernetes clusters into Azure. So Azure Arc enabled Kubernetes allows you to manage and monitor connected Kubernetes cluster both inside and outside Azure. So configuration and application deployment are facilitated through GitOps-based configuration management, which is really great for developers. Monitoring is enabled via Azure Monitor for containers, while security measures encompass Microsoft Defender for Kubernetes for threat protection. Governance is ensured through Azure Policy for Kubernetes, and access control is managed using role-based access control. Furthermore, you can deploy machine learning workloads, and you can using Azure Machine Learning for Kubernetes cluster, and deploy specialized services to leverage a specific hardware. So basically, you can use Azure Machine Learning with your on-premise or other clouds Kubernetes, and you can manage all of things in one centralized environment. It's great, right? I love it. Azure Arc enabled data service empowers the deployment of Azure data services on premises and also at the edge. So the cross public clouds leveraging Kubernetes and your preferred infrastructure. And also it's notable, solution like Azure Arc enables SQL managed instance, and Azure Arc enabled PostgreSQL server receives regular updates, including patches and new features from the Microsoft Container Registry, while adhering to your specified deployment schedule. This approach actually ensure up-to-date on-premise database without compromising control. So that's really great that you can define these kind of policies and tasks for your on-premise SQL managed instance or SQL environment. The key advantage encompass elastic scalability and also enabling dynamic upscaling or downsizing like you have in the Azure. Self-service provisioning facilitated by Kubernetes orchestration, and unified management through familiar tools such as Azure Portal, Azure Data Studio, and Azure CLI with Arc Data Extension. For those who know Azure Data Studio, you know how much these tools will help you when it comes to the data environment. So you can easily use Azure Data Studio for your environment. The system supports this connected scenario, which is really great, and allowing services like self-service provisioning, automated backups and restore, and monitoring to operate locally independent of a direct Azure connection. So if you don't have a direct connection with Azure, so you shouldn't be worried. As I mentioned before, you have only outbound traffic, and if you don't have that outbound traffic, you still have this option to manage your environment. Security measures encompass Microsoft Defender for Kubernetes, and it's really great when it comes to threat protection. An Azure policy for Kubernetes enforcing governance. So this comprehensive offering ensures a seamless, current, and secure experience across diverse deployment environment. The last one is Azure Arc enabled SQL Server extends Azure, extends Azure services to SQL Server instance located outside of Azure. And also it's including data centers, edge sites like retail stores, and various public clouds or hosting providers. This integration centralized SQL Server management through Azure, enabling a unified point of control for your environment. Connecting your SQL Server to Azure offers a comprehensive overview of server and database inventories, which is really great. You can have everything in one view. And leveraging Azure Resource Graph Explorer, you can perform across server queries to answer specific inquiries. So basically, you can easily define different queries for your environment, and you can use it across different environment and centralized by Azure. So you have this option to create charts and customize dashboards for efficient data visualization too. Additionally, additional advantage of Azure Arc enabled SQL Server encompass optimizing server configuration through best practice assessment, which is really great, and enabling Azure Active Directory authentication in SQL Server 2022, enhancing security with Microsoft Defender for cloud vulnerabilities detection, and threat alerts for database on governance across on-premise and multi-cloud and SaaS environment. So you have these different security layers when you attach your SQL environment to Azure Arc, and that works great. So here's the great news when it comes to pricing model of Azure Arc. Take a look at this slide. When you attach servers or Kubernetes to Azure Arc, you won't see any charges. So attaching servers, Kubernetes, or using data service, attaching a SQL database, here is for the resource inventory is free. When you attach servers or Kubernetes in your environment, you won't be charged. Plus, arranging your resources by groups and tags, that's on house, and you don't need to be worried about that. Indexing and searching via Azure resource groups, and setting up security through role-based access, no cost involved, which is really great. So you can have this level of security for your environment, and you do not need to worry about the cost part. And if you are keen on using templates and extensions for automation, don't be worried. No payment needed for those either. And it's part of the flexibility and the features that you can use for your environment, and it's really great. So let's talk about where the charges come in. If you're looking to make the most of Azure Guest configuration to handle updates and streamline patch management, that all be $6 per server per month. So basically update management, patch management, and if you want to use some automation for your environment, you have to consider about this cost. And if Kubernetes is your thing, you are in luck, because the first 6 virtual CPU won't cost you a dime. But if you if your needs go beyond that, it's $2 per additional virtual CPU, which is not that much. Moving on data service, there are 2 plans on the table. For standard plan, it comes in at $73 per virtual core per month. But do keep in mind there is a minimum requirement of 1 virtual core across all scenarios. Now, if you are eyeing the Enterprise Edition, they'll run you $273 per virtual core per month. And the differences between Standard and Enterprise Edition is related to the maximum virtual core and RAM that you can use for your environment. So that's the pricing part. And as you can see, you have a lot of features with no cost, and also you have enterprise features with some additional cost. And also, please keep in mind if you want to use other services like defenders, like some part of automation, or if you want to use some features on Kubernetes which is related to Azure resources, but you want to use it for your on-premise environment, the calculation of cost for those services are based on that services. So for example, for Defender for Cloud, you have to calculate it based on that. You do not need to be worried about additional costs for a specific connection for Azure Arc. So, showtime. Ladies and gentlemen, I think you are ready for thrilling experience, right? It's showtime. We are about to delve into exciting world of Azure Arc, but instead of the typical demo, I like to let's take things up a notch. I'm not just here to guide you through navigating menus and configurations. I'm here to empower you with the knowledge of how to implement your very own test environment within your Azure tenant. And I believe I can show you many things in Azure, but it's perfect if you can create that test environment. And in case of Azure Arc, which is related to on-premise and other clouds, sometimes it's a bit tricky. So you might be wondering, how is that possible? I don't have any physical on-premise setup, nor do I have another cloud platform. So don't worry. I have a solution for you, which is called Azure Jumpstart. A massive shout out to the dedicated Jumpstart team who have invested their time and expertise into deploying various real world scenarios that mirror what might you encounter in your own environment. And thanks to Azure Jumpstart, you have the power to deploy a range of Azure Arc scenarios within your tenant and put them to the test in authentic settings. Maybe you are wondering how to get started with Azure Jumpstart. It's pretty easy. So first, you need to pinpoint the scenario that piques your interest. You can find different scenarios in Azure Jumpstart, and you just need to make sure about some prerequisite, like having necessary CPU cores in your environment, and then set up any required dependencies. And then unleash your preferred deployment method to create your own testing ground. So I think it's really amazing to have your own test environment, and you can play around with Azure Arc, test different scenarios, and enjoy your test environment. So I have a quick demo here. So as you can see, you can navigate to Jumpstart page and you can find different scenarios here. So in different flavors that you can select, for example, full edition, DevOps, or IT Pros. And when you selected your favorite test, you need to select your favorite deployment, like Azure deployment, Terraform, Azure template, or Bicep. As soon as you deploy your environment, you can see some resources in your Azure tenant. One of the key feature that you have here is Jumpstart client box, which helps you a lot. Basically, this is the main VM that you have, and this VM is responsible for deploying your environment based on the tests that you have. So you just need to sit back and enjoy the magics that Jumpstart team has done for you. And this VM deploying different scenarios based on different resources in your environment. So basically, it depends on which tests you want to going to select. But for this demo, I choose IT Pros. So it took around half an hour to deploy. And as you can see, as soon as it's deployed, I have access to different tests. For example, this one is Defender for Cloud, that it's detected a problem in my SQL server. And also, as you can see, the VMs are actually attached to my Azure Arc. And I have the feature to use for the features that I have for my on-premise environment, which is related to auto manage, update management, and so on. So it's really perfect for a testing environment. You can test different aspects of your environment. And for example, the other amazing part is related to SQL Server. So you can easily attach, using a test attach server, you can test as a best practice assessment, and you can see the different part of the assessment in details. For example, the log, the inventories, the possible recommendation for improve your environment. So it's really great scenario that you can use for different part of your testing, and it's all about these features that you can use. So I really recommend you to use this Azure Arc and also Azure Jumpstart, and you can implement different scenarios. Please check Azure Jumpstart page. You can even find the calculation of deploying a specific environment, and you can make sure that you have everything in place. Jumpstart still deploying, and they are providing different scenarios. They recently deployed a very good scenario regarding retail store. I recommended to test that too, and you can enjoy on different scenarios on Azure Arc, and you can learn a lot. So hope this session help you to get a good insight about Azure Arc, and hope you can test Azure Arc with Azure Jumpstart. And I wish you a great Azure sessions and Azure days. And special thanks to Azure Back to School to organize these sessions and recorded sessions, and wish you a great Azure days for you. Take care. Bye.